The first time my best friend whispered my name, I thought she was calling for help. The fifth time, I realized she was confessing something she had buried for nearly 15 years. By the time I understood why Claire Whitmore was sitting on the floor of a sunlit hotel ballroom, clutching an untouched glass of water and repeating my name through broken sobs, the truth had already torn open every wound I thought I had survived. Before I tell you what she revealed that afternoon, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe kindness can heal old pain, forgiveness can rescue damaged hearts, and even the deepest regret deserves a second chance. Claire and I had been best friends since we were 17, when she transferred into my school halfway through our final year and took the empty seat beside me in history class. She was sharp, fearless, and impossible to ignore. With copper-colored hair she constantly pushed behind one ear whenever she was nervous. I was quieter, the kind of person who watched life carefully before stepping into it. Somehow, we balanced each other. She pulled me toward experiences I would have avoided, and I gave her a place where she never had to pretend she was stronger than she felt. Through university, failed relationships, career changes, family funerals, and years of ordinary disappointments, Claire remained the person who knew where every scar came from. At least, that was what I believed. I thought friendship meant there were no locked doors between us. I did not know she had spent most of our lives standing guard over one. The hotel ballroom was filled with late afternoon sunlight because the curtains had been pulled wide for our university reunion luncheon. There was no evening party, no dark dance floor, and no reckless midnight celebration. Everything happened beneath bright chandeliers and clear windows overlooking a public garden crowded with families. Claire had arrived unusually tense, though she tried to hide it beneath laughter. She kept adjusting the sleeve of her cream-colored dress and scanning the room whenever someone mentioned our graduating class. I noticed she barely touched her meal, but she accepted glass after glass of champagne from a circulating waiter. Claire rarely drank, especially during the day. After the third glass, I moved closer and asked whether something was wrong. She smiled too quickly and said she was simply nervous about seeing everyone after so many years. I wanted to believe her, but her hands were trembling. The person she was afraid of arrived 20 minutes later. His name was Russell Hale, a former classmate I had not seen since I was 22. He had once been charming in the careless way young men sometimes are when they have never been forced to understand the damage they cause. Russell had also been connected to the worst season of my life, though until that afternoon, I had never understood how deeply. When I saw him cross the ballroom, older and heavier but still wearing the same confident smile, my chest tightened. Claire went completely still. Russell noticed us, hesitated, and then walked in our direction. Before he reached the table, Claire stood so quickly that her chair struck the floor. She stumbled toward the corridor beside the ballroom, and I followed her without explaining myself to anyone. I found her near a tall window overlooking the garden. Sunlight fell across her face, revealing tears she had tried to wipe away. She said my name once, then again, as if it were the only word she could remember. I guided her toward a quiet sitting area, but her legs buckled before we reached the sofa. She lowered herself onto the carpet, covered her mouth, and began repeating my name with such desperate grief that several guests stared from the doorway. I knelt beside her, held her shoulders, and asked what had happened. Claire looked at me as though she had been waiting years for the courage to meet my eyes. Then she said that she was sorry. Not casually, not as someone apologizing for drinking too much, but as if the word had been burning inside her for half her life. 15 years earlier, shortly after university, I had been engaged to a man named Bennett Cole. He was thoughtful, patient, and deeply loved by my mother, who had been ill at the time. Bennett and I had planned a small daytime wedding in early spring. 3 weeks before the ceremony, he disappeared from my life. He sent a short message saying he could not marry me and that I deserved someone certain. He refused my calls, moved away, and never offered another explanation. My mother died 4 months later, still asking why he had abandoned me when I needed him most. That loss broke something inside me. For years, I believed I had been foolish, unlovable, and too blind to recognize that the future I trusted had never been real. Claire had been the one who stayed. She sat with me through hospital appointments, helped arrange my mother's funeral, and held me when I could no longer pretend I was coping. She became the safest person in my life during the very period when trust became almost impossible. Now, sitting on the hotel carpet in broad daylight, Claire confessed that Bennett had not simply changed his mind. Russell had shown him photographs suggesting I was having an affair. The images were convincing, carefully framed pictures of me entering and leaving an apartment building with another man. That man was a grief counselor named Adrian Pierce, whom I had secretly visited because I was terrified of losing my mother and did not know how to speak about it. I had hidden the counseling from Bennett because I was ashamed of how frightened I felt. Russell had discovered the appointments and twisted them into evidence of betrayal. He told Bennett that Adrian and I had been meeting for months. Bennett confronted Claire because he trusted her as my closest friend. Claire knew the truth. She knew Adrian was a counselor. She knew I had never betrayed Bennett. And she said nothing. At first, I could not understand the confession. My mind rejected it because accepting it meant rebuilding the entire past. I asked why she would let Bennett believe a lie. Claire pressed both hands against her face and admitted that she had been in love with me. Not the simple affection of friendship, but a love she had been afraid to name, even to herself. She had convinced herself that Bennett was taking me away, that marriage would change everything, and that if our engagement ended, I might eventually choose her. When Bennett asked whether Russell's story could be true, Claire had not confirmed it, but she had not denied it either. Her silence had been enough. Bennett left believing the person who knew me best could not defend me. Claire thought she would have time to confess before he disappeared, but events moved too quickly. Then my mother's health declined, and Claire saw the consequences of what she had done. By the time she understood the cruelty of her silence, I was already shattered. The alcohol had loosened the truth, but it had not created it. Claire had carried the guilt every day since. She said that whenever I thanked her for staying beside me, she felt as though she were stealing gratitude she did not deserve. She had encouraged me to hate Bennett because it was easier than admitting she had helped drive him away. She had watched me turn down good relationships, watched me distrust promises, and watched me blame myself for an abandonment she had helped cause. Russell had threatened to expose her silence if she ever revealed his lie, though Claire admitted fear was no longer a sufficient excuse. Nothing was. She had chosen self-interest when loyalty mattered most, and then she had built years of kindness on top of one unforgivable act, hoping the good might someday bury the harm. That I stood without answering. The ballroom, the garden, the voices nearby, and the warm sunlight all seemed distant. Claire reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Her face collapsed. I had imagined many explanations for Bennett's disappearance over the years. I had considered cowardice, infidelity, family pressure, and simple regret. I had never imagined that my closest friend had held the truth while I mourned a life that might have been. I walked into the garden because I needed air. Children were chasing pigeons beside a fountain, elderly couples occupied the shaded benches, and flowers moved gently beneath the afternoon breeze. The ordinary beauty of the day felt almost insulting. Somewhere behind me, Claire remained inside, surrounded by people who believed she had merely become drunk at a reunion. Russell found me near the fountain. He did not deny what Claire had said. His arrogance had faded with age, replaced by the exhausted expression of someone who had rehearsed an apology but knew words could not repair the past. He admitted he had wanted revenge because Bennett had been chosen for a promotion Russell believed belonged to him. Destroying the engagement was meant to distract and humiliate Bennett. He had not expected Bennett to leave the city permanently, nor had he understood how ill my mother was. Russell had heard years later that Bennett discovered Adrian was a counselor, but by then Bennett believed I had asked Claire to protect the affair. Russell said Bennett carried his own shame for abandoning me without allowing me to explain. Hearing this did not make Russell's actions less cruel. It only revealed how many lives one lie had distorted. I asked where Bennett was. Russell said he lived less than an hour away and worked at a rehabilitation center for injured firefighters. He had never married. That fact struck me with unexpected force, not because it promised a romantic reunion, but because it proved the past had not released any of us. Russell handed me a folded card with Bennett's work address. I wanted to throw it into the fountain. Instead, I placed it in my bag and returned to the hotel. Claire was sitting on the sofa now, pale and sober enough to understand what she had destroyed. I told her our friendship could not continue as though nothing had changed. She nodded, tears slipping silently down her face. I also told her that I would not decide her place in my life while I was angry enough to punish her. Forgiveness given too quickly would be dishonest, but revenge would make me resemble the people who had already taken too much from us. 2 days later, during a bright morning, I visited Bennett's workplace. The rehabilitation center was surrounded by tall trees and wide windows designed to fill every room with natural light. Bennett was helping a patient practice walking when he saw me. He froze, one hand still supporting the man's elbow. 15 years disappeared from his face, leaving the frightened young man who had once promised to stand beside me forever. We sat in a quiet courtyard beneath the open sky. At first, neither of us knew where to begin. Then he apologized. He said he had learned the truth about Adrian a year after leaving, but shame convinced him I would never forgive him. He wrote dozens of letters and never sent them. He believed contacting me after my mother's death would only reopen wounds. I told him his silence had already become the wound, there was no dramatic embrace and no instant restoration of lost love. Too much time had passed, and we were not the same people. But we spoke for nearly 3 hours. We told each other about the lives we had built, the mistakes we had made, and the loneliness we had disguised as independence. Bennett admitted that he had loved me, but he had trusted suspicion more than my character. Claire had failed me, Russell had deceived him, but Bennett had chosen to leave without hearing my voice. He accepted responsibility for that choice. For the first time in 15 years, I understood that his disappearance had never proved I was unlovable. It proved he had been afraid, wounded, and wrong. That truth did not erase the pain, but it removed the shame I had carried as though it belonged to me. In the weeks that followed, Claire respected the distance I requested. She began therapy, stopped drinking entirely, and wrote a full confession without asking me to respond. She did not defend herself or list the years she had cared for me as payment for forgiveness. She simply described what she had done, the jealousy that had driven her, and the person she wanted to become. I read the letter several times. The betrayal remained real, but so did the years when Claire had shown up without being asked. Human beings rarely fit neatly into the roles of villain and hero. Claire had once made a devastating choice, then spent years trying to become someone better without possessing the courage to face the truth. Her kindness had not erased her betrayal, but her betrayal did not make every act of kindness false. 3 months after the reunion, I invited Claire to meet me at a public garden cafe during the afternoon. She arrived early and sat with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of the confidence she had always used as armor. I told her I could not return to the friendship we had before, because that friendship had been built on an incomplete truth. Claire lowered her eyes and said she understood. Then I told her that perhaps we could build something new, slowly, honestly, and without pretending trust could be restored in a single conversation. She began crying before I finished. I did not embrace her immediately. Forgiveness was not the same as forgetting, and reconciliation was not the absence of consequences. But when I finally reached across the table, she held my hand with the careful gratitude of someone who knew she had not earned a second chance but intended to honor it. Bennett and I also continued speaking. We did not try to recover the people we had been. Instead, we became acquainted with who we were now. Some afternoons we walked through the center's gardens after his work ended. Sometimes we discussed my mother, and sometimes we spoke about ordinary things. Months later, when he asked whether I would join him for lunch outside the center, I said yes without imagining a wedding, a promise, or a perfect ending. Hope did not need to arrive as certainty. Sometimes it was simply the willingness to take one honest step after years of standing still. The most important change happened quietly inside me. I stopped measuring my worth by who had stayed and who had left. I understood that another person's fear, jealousy, or dishonesty could injure me without defining me. Claire's confession had broken my understanding of the past, but it also released me from a lie I had believed about myself. The reason she kept saying my name that afternoon was not only because she had loved me. It was because my name had become the sound of her guilt, the reminder of the person she had hurt and the friendship she feared she had lost forever. When she finally spoke the truth, she gave me pain, but she also gave me back the missing pieces of my own story. Please leave a meaningful comment about whether you believe trust can be rebuilt after a painful betrayal, and tell our community what forgiveness means to you when forgetting is impossible. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. A year after the reunion, Claire, Bennett, and I stood together in the same public garden where I had first walked away from the truth. It was a clear spring afternoon, and the fountain reflected sunlight across the surrounding trees. We were not a perfect trio, and no one pretended the past had vanished. Russell had sent written apologies and accepted that none of us owed him reconciliation. Claire had learned that love without honesty becomes possession. Bennett had learned that trust requires courage, especially when fear offers easier answers. And I had learned that forgiveness is not a door thrown open for everyone to walk through unchanged. It is a window opened inside the heart so pain no longer controls the air you breathe. As we watched families gather beneath the bright sky, Claire said my name once more. This time, it was not slurred by alcohol or crushed beneath guilt. It was spoken gently, with respect, gratitude, and the understanding that second chances are not returns to the past. They are invitations to create something more truthful than what existed before.